Welcome to our channel, $1 Million Made Easy. On this channel, we develop spreadsheets to run numbers for people. We like to help out young people, number one. We like to help out middle-aged people who are trying to do some catch-up investing. And finally, we like to help retirees who want to know how much they can safely withdraw and have this money last. Folks, in other words, I developed this channel to help most everyone. I'm not a financial advisor. I just love numbers, and I love to create spreadsheets to help them see the awesome power of compounding. In this video, I want to specifically look at the young adult who's first starting out. So what I'm going to do, this is one of the spreadsheets I've created. This to show you. I realize it's looks kind of complicated here, but we're going to look at somebody. Maybe they're 22 years old and have 45 years till age 67, which is full retirement Social Security age, maybe down to age 31. So this spreadsheet is going to look at somebody basically in their 30s. How much do you think it would take to get to $1 million if you had 45 years? If you were 22 years old and wanted to work till you're age 67, how much do you think it would take to get to $1 million? Pick a number. Just pause the video and think, well, how much do you think it would take? And what we do on this channel is reuse the returns for the S&P 500 for the last 100 years, including the Depression years, including the down decade of the 2000s, and we come up with some kind of a range. So again, have you made a guess? Watch what happens if I just do $100, be $100 a month, and we're going to increase that by 3% a year. So somebody 22 years old that just could save $100 and increase that by 3% a year. Where might they be in 45 years? And again, we're going to do the numbers. This is going to update for every single year using the numbers from 1925 to the present for each of these different time periods. This is the black row right here is how much you would put in over those time periods. We're going to be specifically looking at the 45-year column. And I want you to notice something right here. You would have put in $111,000 over a 45-year period, with just $100 a month, increasing that by 3% a year. And in the worst case scenario, in the last 100 years, you would have $1 million. That's what it would take, folks, to get to $1 million, saving just $100 a month if you're age 22 and want to go to age 67, or we could look at somebody's age 20 that wants to go to age 65. Anyway, they're 45 years away from retirement. This is what they have. And folks, this is in the worst case scenario. This is the median, this column, 1.649. The best case scenario you're going to find is $3 million. Let's look at the actual breakdown. Breakdown is 100% of the time you get to $1 million, color-coded in green. 68% of the time, color-coded in blue, you'd actually get to 1.5 million. There's actually 16% of the time, color-coded in gold, you'd get to $2 million. Now, rather than going by each one of these, let's go to the 40-year period. Say you have 40 years. How much do you think it would take to get to $1 million in the worst-case scenario? Oh, one other thing I want to do is I always like to improve these spreadsheets wherever I can. And somebody said I shouldn't be using depression-type numbers. So what I've done is change this. You can pick any year you want. So I want you to notice this $1 million right there. They have a valid point because the 2000s weren't as bad as the Depression years. I'm going to change this to just since 1970. And you'll see how I change the spreadsheet. I love changing them. So instead of $1 million in the worst case scenario, I'm going to hit enter. Now it's 1.448. So if we don't use depression-type returns, if we just look at the returns from 1970 on, which we did have a bad decade, but it's a lot better off than what you would in the worst case scenario during the Depression years. So that's one of the variables I've changed on this channel to try to run numbers the way you want me to run them. So in this case, the worst case scenario would be 1.448. So you could probably get by with saving just $75 a month and still get to $1 million. Now, again, we're trying to get to $1 million, and we realize that's not going to have the same buying power. So I always put this up here, what the buying power of these amounts would be after these periods of time given a 3% inflation rate. But I want you to notice, even in the worst case scenario, this kind of money would be worth this kind of money in 45 years. But look at what I recently saw this. The average account balance for somebody 65 older was only $279,000, with the median being half the people had more than this and half the people less. They only had $87,000. Folks, we're looking at saving just $100 a month And having this kind of money, and even though the buying power wouldn't be near as much, you still have more than the average person uh, in Vanguard does, or the median account balance, or even the average account balance. The average account was 279, which that was raised up this 87,000 because a bunch of rich people would have really raised this to an average of 279. But you would have more than that with just $100 a month. Okay, let's go to the 40-year period now. How much do you think it would take to get to $1 million uh, in nominal value? And then we'll go ahead and look at the buying power up here in 40 years. But how much do you think it would take? Let's just take a wild guess together. Was your guess fairly close? $150 a month, increasing that by 3% a year. You can see going down through here. And the worst case scenario in the last 100 years for a 40-year period, you'd have $1,095,000. That's using 1970 numbers. Let's go back to 1925 numbers, which would include the Depression years. Then you wouldn't quite make it to a million. It'd be 930,000. So what we're doing is either including these kind of returns or not including them, and you can see the difference. Like I said, I'm always trying to improve these spreadsheets to give you what people are asking for, and I love it when you ask me to run different numbers and ask me to make some improvements, and that's what I tried to do. But look at this, 930,000 with just $150 a month. Again, what would have that in the buying power? You have the buying power of 285,000. But remember what the average was right here, and you could have that in buying power in 40 years, just saving $150 a month and increasing that by 3% a year. Let's go to the lowest one here. Somebody may, and by the way, if you're 40 years, if you're going to age 65, you may already have some money saved up. I could put a beginning balance in here. Let me just show you how it works. Let's say you actually had 15,000 saved up. I want you to see how these numbers change. So you have 15,000 beginning balance, you're saving $150 a month and you're increasing that by 3% a year. Watch what happens to these numbers when I just have that. Again, if you're 25 years old, you've already saved up a little bit. See how this changes the numbers. Just that $15,000 a month. I mean, $15,000 beginning balance raised it from 930,000 to 1,400,000. That's how much that 15,000 would have grown over 40 years. That shows you, these graphs kind of show you how it can just take off. That's the compounding effect, the compound growth you can get when you just get that money in there early. Look what the difference that 15. Again, folks, this is in the worst case scenario. If you already had 15,000 saved up, you had 40 years till you reach retirement age, you would have put in 150,000. It would have grown to almost 10 times that amount in the worst case scenario. Again, this color right here is the median in this column, and this is the maximum you're going to see in this column. What would the buying power at 1.46 be? Almost $500,000 in buying power. Again, I like to go back to this. What's the average balance? About half of that. That's what we do. That's why we love to run numbers, showing people it doesn't take that much if you can get in there early and if you just let it go for 40 or 45 years. Let's do one last one. Let's look at the 36-year period. What do you think it might take to get to $1 million? Right now, it's already at $1 million because we started at 15,000. I'm going to take that back to zero, and we're going to try to come up with a sum right here. I'm going to run it at $200 and see what it might come out to be. Actually, I changed it to $225 a month, not having any to begin with, increasing it by 3% a year. In the worst case scenario, say you're 30 years old and you have 36 years till you want to retire at age 66 in this case, you would have put in 170,000. In the worst case scenario, last 100 years, you would have 954,000. That's if we include the Depression years. What happens if I change it to 1970 or even 1960? We can change it to any year you want. See what happens. It's 954,000 when I hit enter. 980,000, about 1970. Still 980,000. So it looks like somewhere between 1960 and the present, we had the worst case scenario to have 980,000. Basically $1 million. That's if you're age 30. Again, let's do one more thing. Let's say you already have some money saved up. Let's go with that 15,000 just to show you what $15,000 can do if you let it accumulate for 36 years, even in the worst case scenario. Right now, we're at 980,000 for the worst case scenario. Let's go ahead and run these numbers and see how much difference that $15,000 can make. Went from 980,000, worst case scenario, if you didn't have the 15,000, up to 1.35. Basically, $400,000 more that 15,000 would have grown by in the worst case scenario in the last 100, actually since 1970, for a 36-year period. You can see the breakdown here for the 36 right here, color coded. You're going to get to $1,000,000 100% of the time, 97% of the time. Color coded in blue, you're going to get to 1.5 million, and there's 58% of the time color coded in gold, which you can see a lot of gold going down through your over $2,000,000. Can you get to $1,000,000? What's it going to cost you? If you're 20 years old, we saw $100 a month would do it. We saw the 150 would do it if you had 40 years. We saw that 200, maybe 225 would do it if you had like 36 years until you retire. So somewhere along here between in your 20s, from age 20, maybe age 30, these are the kind of numbers, either $100 to 150 to 225 will get you to $1,000,000. We saw it won't have the same buying power, but still you're going to be so much better off than the average retiree today, especially if you look at the median account balance for the retiree today. You're going to have well over this 279,000, which is the average. Again, we said that was kind of skewed because of some rich people that may have raised that from 87,000 to 279. But folks, that's what we do on this channel. We just love running numbers for people. But I want to especially encourage young people. Get started, get it in there when you're young, and you can see these kind of graphs. This is a 1925 graph. Just watch this for just a second as I click down through there. You're going to see it's going to be a bumpy ride, but look how it takes off. If you can be in it, and this is for 36 years. Let me click on the 40 year. Actually, I'm just going to go show the 45 because it really shows you how the compounding effect can do it if you're in it for the long term. Oh, it'll be bumpy. There'll be times you might want to sell, but if you just stick with it, look at the even 1928, 1929. You can see the graph just takes off. It takes a while. Those first 15 or 20 years, you may not be doing very good. You might have a bad decade. But look what happens if you can just stay in it for the long term. 1938 graph, look at that. Took a nosedive right along in there, which would be 73, 74 numbers when the market dropped like that. But look how it came back. If you can just be in it for the long term, these are the kind of numbers you can look at. These are the kind of graphs you can look at. And this is how little it takes to get to $1,000,000. And if you already have some saved up, more power to you. But again, that's what we do on this channel. We love doing it. Please consider subscribing. Please share this channel with others. Let people know about it. Please like the videos, and thank you so much for watching.